The seat I would have been sitting in did not survive. That is the sentence I keep landing on, 2 years later, whenever someone asks me if I believe in signs. I never have a clean answer for them. I only have the seat. 3 small things happened the morning my husband wanted to drive us up to the lake. I laughed at the first one. I explained away the second. The third I could not get past, and because I couldn't, I'm the one sitting here telling you this, instead of him standing somewhere telling a shorter, sadder story about me. You have to understand who did the driving in our marriage. He did. All of it. The car, the money, the calendar, which of my friends we still bothered to see, and how long we stayed once we got there. For 15 years I rode in the passenger seat of my own life and called it being taken care of. Let me give you one picture, so you don't think I'm shaping this after the fact. Early on, at a restaurant, a waiter asked what I'd like, and my husband answered for me before I'd opened the menu. He knew what I'd want, he said, smiling, and everyone at the table found it charming. So did I. It took me years to feel the real shape of it, that a man can order for you for 15 years, and one day you notice you've forgotten the taste of anything you ever chose yourself. We'd been bad for a while by then. Not loud bad. The kind that goes quiet room by room, until you're 2 people who share a house and a last name and not much air. So when he told me he'd booked a place up at the lake, 4 hours north, just the 2 of us, to sort ourselves out, I wanted so badly to believe it was a good idea that I said yes before I'd checked whether I meant it. I always said yes before I checked. But the whole week before that trip, something in me leaned back from it. Not a thought. A lean. The way your body leans away from the edge of a high place while your mind is still admiring the view. I had never once refused that man a plan in 15 years, and I did not know how to begin with a feeling I couldn't even spell. The night before we were meant to leave, I dreamed I was underwater in the dark. I was belted into a seat, and the belt would not release, and my hands kept searching for a buckle that wasn't where a buckle should be. Cold water climbing past my chin. I woke with my own nails buried in my palm and the sheets soaked through, my heart going like something trying to get out of a small room. I told myself it was nerves. People have ugly dreams before trips they're afraid of, and I was afraid of this one for reasons that had nothing to do with the road. So I made coffee and let the ordinary morning talk me out of it, the way ordinary mornings will. Then, locking the front door behind our bags, the key snapped off in the lock, clean in half. One piece turned in my fingers and the other stayed in the door, and I stood on my own step holding a stub of metal that a minute earlier had been a whole key. My husband laughed and said the house was falling apart like everything else, and told me to hurry, we were losing the light. I laughed too. I want you to hear that I laughed. Because a dream is a dream and a key is just cheap brass. And a woman who lines those 2 things up in a row and calls them a warning is a woman I did not want to be. So I dropped the broken half into my coat pocket. I still can't tell you why I kept it, and I walked out to the car. The engine was already running. The passenger door stood open. My hand was on the frame of it. And a bird came down against the windshield. There was no wind that morning. Nothing crossing the sky. Out of a still, unremarkable hour a bird dropped hard against the glass, directly over the passenger side, and slid down onto the wiper and did not move again. I looked at the small broken thing on the glass. I looked at the seat behind it. My seat. And the dream came back all at once, the belt, the black water, the buckle that wasn't there, and the broken key was a cold little weight against my hip, and every hair on both my arms stood up in the same second. My grandmother used to say a bird that strikes a window is one soul asking whether it can trade places with another. I never believed her. I want that on the record too. I never believed a word of it. But I stood in that driveway with her voice in my ear and I could not make my body get into that car. People expect there to have been a voice. A vision. Something you could put in a film. It wasn't that. It was quieter, and it was worse. It was my whole body voting no while my mind was still trying to be polite about it. I stepped back from the door and told him I couldn't go. He asked what I meant, couldn't go. I said I didn't feel right, that I'd take the train up in the morning, that not today, I couldn't, today. And even then, shaking on my own driveway, I noticed the thing I'd somehow missed for 15 years. He never once asked if I was all right. He was angry that I was breaking the plan. He told me I always did this, that I ruined things, that he wasn't going to sit and wait for me to be reasonable. Then he pulled the door shut himself and drove off while I was still standing there trying to explain a feeling I had no words for. I watched the car to the end of the street. He didn't slow at the corner. I remember that clearly, that he didn't even slow. The call came a little after 11 that night. There had been an accident on the mountain road, on the stretch with the long drop on one side and no rail worth the word. He was alive. I have to say that before anything else, because for 2 years people have heard this story and braced for the worst, and the worst is not what happened to him. A truck had come across the line on a blind bend. He'd hauled the wheel toward the rock on his side and taken the whole thing on the other side. The passenger side. The seat he would have had to slow down and wait for me to be sitting in. I drove up in the dark with my sister, both of us saying almost nothing, and the whole way I kept one hand in my coat pocket around a broken half of a key I hadn't remembered putting there. I saw the car before I saw him. They'd towed it to a lot near the hospital, and I can't tell you what made me stop there first instead of going straight up to the ward, but I did. The driver's side was beaten but whole enough. Doors sprung, glass gone, but a shape a person had clearly climbed out of. He walked away from that side with a broken wrist and a line of stitches above one eye. The passenger side was not a side anymore. It was folded almost to the middle of the car, the seat crushed into a shape a body does not go into and come back out of. A trooper standing near me said it plainly, not knowing what he was setting down in my hands. He said whoever had been sitting there would not have come home. My seat. The one the bird fell in front of. The one the black water rose over in the dream. The one that, for the actual life of me, and I mean that as exactly as a person can mean anything, I had not been able to sit down in. And there is one more thing, and I have never known where to put it. In the glove box of that ruined car was a hotel reservation. 1 room, 2 nights, in a town that is not where the lake is, a different direction off the highway, a full hour past the turn we should have taken. I never asked him about it. By the time I could have, I already understood I was never going to sit through whatever explanation he'd have built by then. Maybe the weekend was exactly what he'd said it was. Maybe it was where he meant to end things with me, on his terms, for hours from any way home that wasn't his car. I will never know which. That is the part people cannot stand about this story, that I lived, and I still don't get to know what I lived through. I didn't leave him in a scene. There wasn't a scene left to make. I sat by his hospital bed for 3 days while the swelling went down, and somewhere in those 3 quiet days the marriage finished the way the house had gone dark, room by room, until there was nothing left lit in any of it. He kept saying how lucky it was I hadn't been in the car. He was grateful. I was grateful too. But gratitude is not the same thing as staying, and I think we both felt the crushed seat sitting there in the room with us the whole time, a third person neither of us would name. On the second night, from the hospital lobby, I put a deposit on a small apartment with my own money, the money I'd quietly kept for no reason I could have named until then. When they discharged him, I was the one who drove. I drove, and then I took my own things out of that house while he was still learning to hold a cup with his left hand. My sister came to help me carry boxes and said only one thing about any of it. She said, "You've been trying to leave that man since your wedding. It just took the whole world lining up to give you permission." I kept almost nothing from those 15 years. I kept the broken half of that key. It's in a drawer now, next to nothing, and every so often I take it out and hold it and put it back.
People want me to tell them I believe now. That the dream was a message and the key was a warning and the bird was a hand laid on my shoulder. I don't say that. I don't say the other thing either, that a frightened woman got lucky and a truck did the rest of the work. I've learned to live in the narrow space between those two answers, because it turns out that's the only room where both the wonder and the plain sense are allowed to stay at the same time.
What I believe is smaller than a miracle, and I'm surer of it than of nearly anything. I believe the body knows a long time before the mind agrees to listen. I believe a sign is only a coincidence you were fortunate enough to obey. And I believe I spent 15 years letting a man drive me toward places I never once chose. And that it took a bird against the glass to teach me to reach for my own door. I don't get to know what I was spared. I only get to be spared, and to have finally, once in my life, been the one who stepped out of the car. Somewhere in you there may be a small no you keep talking yourself out of tonight. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a sign. I'm only going to tell you that I laughed at the first two. Have you ever obeyed a feeling you couldn't explain, or ignored one you still lie awake over? Tell me here. I read every single one, and the ones that won't leave me become the next episodes.